All right. We are good to go.
Hey guys. One sec here.
Hey, man.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect.
Cool, loud and clear. Just like test for ambient noise. Can you hear this much at all?
A little bit.
A tad bit.
Just a bit, but you hear this
Yeah.
much more
Yeah.
prominently? Okay, good.
Sorry about all that. Just kind of
no
testing
worries.
out some new stuff, new formats.
No worries. I wish I could have got that. I mean, I kind of did get the camera to work, but it froze while I was setting it up, and I've never done a virtual cam before, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Didn't want to have like an audio issue mid-flight.
No biggie. I'm excited to have you on. I really appreciate you for kind of taking the time and doing this.
No, my pleasure, man. I'm always flattered when people want to talk to me, and I mean, are interested in things I talk about. So I enjoyed a lot.
Yeah. And in case anybody isn't aware, I'm going to go ahead and call you Bunny, even though that may be a little bit weird, but I'm just going to run with that.
That's fine. Dimitri works too, but Bunny seems to be the going one.
We have Bunny from RabbitX here. This is episode 30 or 31? Episode 31 of Exit Liquidity. It's our first episode other than the primer on our derivatives for G-Gen's season. We're kind of trying to focus on some interesting stuff in this ecosystem. And so we kind of start intros a little bit differently here. We center kind of your crypto history and your kind of introduction into the ecosystem around your difficulties or most memorable moments as Exit Liquidity. So kind of just kick us off with that.
Yeah, like I definitely have a poetic one related to that, I suppose. It was sort of two-part for me. I first was introduced to this space by way of a very technologist-esque roommate who, told me about Bitcoin when it was $7, Doge when it first came out. And, I thought they were cool, but I thought they were just, currencies. I particularly don't like the word cryptocurrency. I actually think it's kind of harmful to our space because people think what we're trying to do is just make currencies, which don't inherently have a reason to have value. And I think it's where people kind of struggle with, like, what's the value being made here? And because they just think it's all money, and like, we're not building money, we're building, different forms of distributed compute and interactions in businesses that operate in like a totally new domain. And I just think that's a misnomer. And so anyway, that was my first intro, but then I was kind of not into it for a while after that. I just thought they were cool, but wasn't particularly like, enraptured by it. Then I remember I came across the space by way of when a company got deplatformed by AWS and got kicked off its cloud servers. I remember coming across someone saying, and I was mostly in like the financial world, like, tech stocks and things like that. I remember coming across a tweet and it was like, Filecoin, this is what Filecoin does. And it's like, a crypto helps with, AWS with compute. What? Like, these are currencies. What are you talking about? And then that was really where the scales fell from my eyes, where it's like, wow, wait, these are like serious companies and infrastructure being built. You can value this with like the framework you sort of would a company or other things. And I've just been all down the rabbit hole ever since. That's on a personal front. What actually brought me to this space is very much an Exit Liquidity event. I did a thread on this where, I made a lot of money in the last handful of years, mostly in tech stocks and some in crypto too, but it's probably like 70-30 SaaS tech stocks and crypto. And then I outperformed indexes and, all that stuff. I just, it went really well. And I got wiped very, very hard on the decline. On the bear market, we just saw like, bad enough to where I was like, all right, well, I'm not retired anymore. Thought I was, and I was very much a meme of what you would describe a bull market was, where you think you're done. Look at all the money I have, but it's all, I get tied to stuff that's really tied to interest rates. And, I learned my lesson a really hard way and I got wiped very hard. And enough to the point where I was like, all right, let's, I'm very much interested in DeFi. I love this space. I'm I love self-educating on it, reading it all the time. Let's see what's out there. And I started looking around like crypto jobs list and some crypto board places, and I found Rabbit that way, which was originally Strips, which was an interest rate swap project. I started over a year ago, back when it was that, and then we pivoted to Rabbit, which is a perps dex, and I've been helping build it and working with the team ever since. So a rough journey kind of brought me here, but it was a good one because, frankly, like I'm much happier now having been wiped like that, and now having this opportunity here and what I've learned so far, and getting to write and share stuff, and like, you know, meeting you guys and doing pods, and you know, that it's way more gratifying to me than just managing my own money, frankly, and just kind of lacking a purpose or something to do as much. So I'm glad it happened. I learned a great deal. You know, everyone pays their tuition in financial markets. I paid mine, and it put me on a journey that led me here, and made me reach out and find Rabbit, and we're building something really great. And yeah, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of people's sentiment, especially mine as well. Like life was a lot better when interest rates were lower generally. So when you were kind of stuck in the TradFi ecosystem, were you educated at all? Were you writing as much as you are now?
Yes and no. So I like two parts to that, I suppose. I worked at a brokerage for a number of years as a risk analyst on their hedge fund desk. When I was there, their compliance department actually wouldn't let me write. I actually got in trouble for that because I didn't even know I couldn't. And they hired me, and they still kept writing. And it's like, hey, whoa, like, because I'm mentioning ticker symbols, and officially someone who works for this company is talking about ticker symbols, and that could be construed as financial advice, and compliance, like, he can't do it. So I got nixed on that for a while. But before and after that, I was not nearly to the degree I am now, though, and not about nearly the same like system style broad thinking that you see from me. It was more like economic writing, political writing, some financial writing on, you know, certain names and symbols. And it kind of grew from there. But yeah, I've been published on a handful of platforms. Some pretty noteworthy ones like MSN Money, The Street, Real Clear Markets, Real Clear Politics. So yeah, I have writing background, but not as consistent as you're seeing from me now. And it kind of ties into the whole financial interest too.
Awesome. Yeah, I think your writings are definitely what I gravitated to when I came across your profile. Your threads are like, you're a very great storyteller, and I think you tie a connection between just like regular degenerate crypto trader to like a kind of broader awakening of like thinking about larger scale things. And so that's what interested me a lot. And one of my kind of favorite threads that you've written is your multi-part series. And kind of, I feel like what a lot of people know you for is the Vietnamese farmer thesis that you center around how crypto and this like industry will like combat the traditional finance market. And in your analysis, well, I also want you to just break that down kind of from the beginning. The two parts that I think are important for people that haven't heard it are kind of crypto becoming from defensive to offensive versus kind of the ways that traditional markets have and governments have been going from, well, they're kind of always on the offensive. But yeah, and I want you to dive into that a bit for someone who maybe hasn't come across it yet.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for prompting me that way too. I think I've done like 7 or 8 podcasts now, but I sometimes start speaking as if someone's already read it, and I know that's, you know, you got to kind of start from the ground up. And so like the original kind of impetus for like this parallel and kind of drawing the comparisons between warfare was between warfare and business, which like the cycles of those tend to correlate fairly closely, but with a lag between them. War is pretty consistently one cycle ahead, which makes it a, you know, somewhat informative leading indicator, you could say, for like adversarial and competitive domains. Is sort of really what that means, and that how business follows suit to that. Because, you know, we see a lot of business war analogies, right? Like there's all the metaphors in business are like have some kind of violent warfare kind of parallel to them. I'm spacing on some of them now, but like a lot of the things you'll use is like has a war component to it. And I don't think that's kind of, I think that's kind of like has a subconscious theme to it too that kind of recognizes that. But then taking that a step further, I was like, well, DeFi is definitely a new paradigm of, frankly, how business and commerce and transactions occur. This has like the parallels here will probably be equally as strong. And I break that down in the series of like, you know, first gen warfare, very rudimentary, first gen business, again, you know, basic kind of guilds and mercantilism, things like that. And then you see it evolve, and you see the same thing with crypto, where it's like just basic Bitcoin transactions and spending 10,000 Bitcoins on a pizza. It's just basic, like sending money to another. Then Ethereum gets introduced, which allows more coordination. And that's how warfare evolves too. Like what makes it more lethal and evolved is when there's more central command and coordination that then orients people more effectively. It's kind of the same thing here. And it basically iterates and evolves from there to where war has eventually taken us has been guerrilla warfare is basically like the dominant strategy now. Guerrilla war or proxy wars. Those seem to be like the only wars that are fought these days. And financial wars. But like in terms of like physical violent ones, it's like basically guerrilla and proxy ones. And looking to, again, the successes and failures of war, and especially as it relates to the US, the US is partly what it is because it's so overwhelmingly dominant in wars. But who has it been losing to, you know, over the last, since World War II, we'll say? It's lost to rice farmers and goat herders. It lost to Vietnam, and it lost in Afghanistan. Like it just was worn out. It didn't accomplish what it wanted. It didn't care enough to persist. And the locals and the ones actually fighting the wars, the guerrillas, the Viet Cong and Vietnamese rice farmers of sorts, you know, they wanted it more. They were more diffuse. They're harder to pin down. And that's extremely difficult to defeat, like empirically so. Like you're seeing it with the central commands of major militaries. They can't take out these way like weaker, inferior enemies. And it's like, why not? What's the struggle here? It's a hard problem. Like when your enemy is unidentified and diffuse, and you know, it's just not something traditional military structures can apparently take on very well. And another parallel here is, okay, so the US military to say traditional warfare or other militaries and guerrillas is like what we're looking at here. Who's our US military? Like what goes after us and gives us a hard time? Like it's the SEC, right? It's regulators. It's these entities of the state that go after people who aren't doing what they should in a regulatory environment. Or how are they designed to do that? They're designed to do that in exactly the same way that the US military is designed to go after adversaries. It succeeds in big centralized, powers that occupy territory with normal hierarchies of command, like a very common, like well-known manifestation, very legible, you could say, manifestation of what you're going after. And the SEC does the same thing. It goes after Deutsche Bank, Barclays, Fidelity, right? Like when it goes after them, it goes to them and then it calls their compliance department. Their compliance department sends them to the risk manager. Like there's a very structured form of command, same as a military, right? So they're built to be legible for them. What are they not built to go after? They're not built to go after tens of thousands of developers and millions of users across a global network armed with cryptography and AI, all the intellectual capital, and a lot of real capital too, which is us. So that's where that comes from too. Like we are like the Viet Cong writ large over a digital cryptographic on-chain rice field. And they're not going to stop it. You can't stop it. It's for the same reason they can't take down guerrillas in normal warfare. It's the same parallel. And that's where my, I'll stop here for a bit because it's getting long, but that's where my like near-term pessimism comes from, that it is going to get worse and just prepare for that. But long-term deep optimism, we're going to win. Like we are persistent. We can't be defeated. Just don't die is the strategy here. And we're going to outlast a foe that just doesn't have the resources to stop it.
Yeah, I think that's an important part and an important connection that a lot of people that are just like similar to me and Ollie, who are basically just like shitcoining and kind of playing around in DeFi. There's like a more grandiose thesis and I guess adversary that starts to like form, and you can shut off the macro outlook for all of this for a while. But I mean, I've talked to people in the US that are interacting with these stuff that have like substantial fears that they're going to wake up one day and like be put in handcuffs for what they're doing. It's a little bit out there, but I think like the community that we're a part of doesn't think about these things as much as they should. And then in that thread, you started leading into a part more recently about what the offensive looks like for all of the players in this ecosystem. You mentioned a little bit about like cyberpunk AI teams, like going on an offensive, and the increase in anonymous development of all kinds of protocols. So I'd love to hear more about that part specifically.
Yeah. Yeah, the offensive part is tougher. But yeah, I definitely think it'll manifest once it's like very gloves off kind of thing. Like I said, like I think like right now I see what I see mostly is like legal analysis on this. And like, the SEC is applying this rule unfairly. They're not understanding this. Politicians need to get with that. And like, that's not the issue here. The issue is not an educational shortcoming. Like they know what they're doing. Like they're intentionally providing subterfuge to create a political formula to justify why we are bad and why we must be stopped, because DeFi fundamentally disintermediates U.S. control of financial infrastructure. Like it's really that simple. Like that's why we're going to get attacked just from a game theoretic standpoint. Why would any superpower who largely maintains a lot of their empire now on dollar diplomacy and sanctions and KYCing and financial control and most of all of its sanctions financially derived, like everything that's being built here undermines that. It detracts from that power and control. Like, and once you see it from that lens, I just see like legal analysis on like how stable coins are being viewed. I'm like, it doesn't matter. They'll create whatever justification they want. Like this is the entity that creates the laws, legislates the laws and enforces the laws and interprets the laws in their own courts. Like the courts are extensions of the state, and there's some independence there. I know I'm being maybe too broad in describing the court system as being like completely a vestige of or an arm of the state, but it is. And you're relying fundamentally on an entity that creates all the rules and then imposes the rules and interprets the rules to protect you from you detracting from its control of financial resources and power. So that's where I'm like, this is going to get worse. Like they're going to go after that. And so that's where that near-term issue comes from for me. It's like, yes, you should fully expect that. And I don't think, spending time poring over like legalese is going to be helpful here. I do think once eventually this really hits home for most people, it'll be kind of clear, analogize this to that the US starts, declares a war on crypto like they did the war on drugs, right? Like when it just becomes very obvious that like, we don't like you, we're going after you. Like your lawyers are not helping you anymore. The same way a lawyer for a drug dealer, like it doesn't really help him that much, right? It might help a little bit, but you're not looking to law to justify why their drug dealer could do something. And again, I know that's kind of a dire parallel for us, and we're obviously not drug dealers, but I'm using this to kind of draw a metaphor to how the state will view us and how the law approach I don't think will be useful when they really want you and want to go after you. And so, I think naturally when any kind of group of people feels they're being unfairly targeted, attacked, manipulated, arrested, they'll get angry. And they'll probably fight back in some regard. I kind of analogize what the artillery is in this space is going to be like deceptive attacks. Where are my notes here? I wrote them up here. Hold on, I want to find them. I can't find them. But like AGI, LLMs, things like that, like cryptography, those would be kind of our artillery to fight this war. It'll be mostly a fifth gen, war of deception, duplicity, things like that. It won't be a kinetic one. I don't think there will be like physical fighting, but I think it'll be a lot of disinformation, propaganda, and assaults on each other. Maybe financial ones too. Maybe if, we keep getting attacked or individuals keep getting unfairly detained and, abused like the tornado dev, who's to say some kind of retribution doesn't happen there for a politician doing that as well? I don't think it's that black pill to say or schizo to say that there might be a black water of crypto happening if you keep just going after and haranguing people that are really just creating financial infrastructure and holding digital assets. So there'll be pushback in some regards in that way. And I don't think war in this domain is won by like aircraft carriers and fighter jets and infantry. I think it's won by intellectual capital and digital resources and knowing how to leverage AI and crypto to your advantage. And we have all the intellectual capital there in that regard. Like, I think I would overwhelmingly favor us in that way. We have more people, and I think they're smarter. So that's where some of the pushback might manifest. Kind of a long answer. I hope that's good.
No, that's very clear. And most of the fighting in general that has kind of survived has been the Ethereum ecosystem. You're obviously in that ecosystem a little bit, mostly with Rabbit, and I kind of want to hear more about your thesis on its survivability if the Tornado Cash kind of sanctions test was, how significant that was. Yeah, kind of the survivability, your faith and your thesis on the Ethereum ecosystem. Is it strong enough yet to survive what you think is going to happen? Yeah.
I think so. That's a tough one. No, I mean, that's actually probably from like I'm inclined to answer that like technically, and I really don't have the technical acumen to deeply go into that. But from right now, like it seems like we are getting to critical mass of like true robustness and having enough nodes and validators to where we can withstand that. Like if say Lido was targeted by regulators, which I think it will, and say those validators go down, how quickly can they respawn elsewhere? And if the military goes in and demands, say, like, Lido validators do something, the way Lido is structured, I kind of think actually mitigates from that. I forget, I read how they're set up, but I don't think it's like in a way where Lido can dictate like all validators do some kind of 51% thing. So I believe we're very much trending towards that. If the US wanted to put all its military effort towards it, maybe the NSA could take it down. I don't know. That's kind of the lens through which I'm looking at it. Like they kind of have done that to Tor, apparently, which is the onion router, which is the way you can stay truly like anonymous online. Apparently, like a cost inconsiderate attacker has been setting up Tor routing nodes as a means to try to unmask people. So, if the government wants to do something, it can put a lot of resources to it, and it has, infinity money to do it. If we just need to build something robust enough to withstand that, or to withstand some kind of attack that maybe isn't blatant, but is what's going on. So I think Ethereum will become that. I don't know if it could withstand something like that truly tough now. That might be a good question for like Vitalik or someone to ask on, like, say the military wanted to go full force on this. Like, could it? How would it do it? And what would that look like? I would love to listen to that from like a guy with deep technical expertise. Vitalik, if you're not listening to this, but someone asked Vitalik to go over that red team, blue team scenario, that would be really cool to hear. I think Ethereum becomes that, though. I think it becomes the mother layer, so to speak, or the main L1. But I think there will be a lot of other L1s too that'll be very valuable as well. Frankly, I think it kind of is to our benefit to not have ultimately ever more than, say, like 30 or 40% of DeFi TVL to be on ETH. I think it's much healthier for the ecosystem to have multiple different layer ones that just present different modes of attack and different kind of safety for us and help this ecosystem thrive. For the same reason, like having one gigabank is also not good for a country. It makes it inherently fragile if that bank gets taken out. So I actually did a thread on that too, why it's actually in our interest to have multiple layer ones, just from a survivability standpoint, robustness approach. So anyway, that's my thinking on it. I can't answer that technically, but from like a forward-looking stance, I think the answer will be yes. I think ETH continues to be the main core layer. And I believe there'll probably be like 4 or 5 other very substantial ones supporting it too.
Dimitri, I'm wondering, like, given like how you see the like battlefield currently, I guess, and given you have this sort of deep forward-thinking optimism, I guess for context, I recently read the Hedgic founders like book, which was like a postmortem on, or not postmortem, I guess, but just looking back on what happened with Hedgic, what went wrong, what she learned throughout the process, and then the last section, which I found the most interesting, was a lot more forward thinking, and I found a lot of the language in it to be pretty similar to some of the stuff you're saying now. And she was saying that given that we have the potential to disintermediate any arbitrary financial transactions the way we do, we should be using that to build entirely new systems and experiments and to essentially just like fuck around and like figure out what sticks. I'm wondering if you whether you see the idea of trying completely new things to be better, or to try and create what we already have off chain, but put it on chain in a way that it's permissionless, trustless, more efficient. Like, are we trying to improve what's already there, or are we experimenting with new stuff, trying to strike gold at something? Or like, would you even like take a step back further and say that there needs to be more focus on improving the block space we do have, or creating better options for interoperability, scalability, stuff like that?
Did she give examples on? I'm not familiar with this article. Did she give examples on what she meant by like completely novel like paradigms or new things that you're describing?
So I don't believe she did, but the backdrop of it was given that when Hedgic first launched, it was the first option for users to use an options AMM on chain, and to specifically have a liquidity pool where they could underwrite options and earn yield for something that has historically been difficult to do off chain in a way that's profitable. So I kind of treated that as like her like core example, but there I don't think there were any mentions past that.
Okay. Um, I guess yes to both. We should, as we come up with like new primitives or new instantiations of things, like we should not be a hostage to the way how things were or how they're done for sure. And I think we see some examples of that now with new primitives like perpetuals, like what we do. Those are a DeFi native creation, which iterate on what a futures contract is. Flash loans, which I actually don't know how much of a force for good those are. I honestly think that's a bit of a villain creation that's on net, not a good thing. They have some useful applications for sure, like with liquidations and whatnot, but they, I can't remember the time I've heard an attack that didn't like use a flash loan, so that's an example. That's an example of a new thing being built. But I would show some reverence here for the past and for TradFi, and that there's a lot of history here to be drawn from, and like I promise you that probably a lot of the things we're thinking of have definitely been thought of before by some very smart people, and there's a reason why they probably centered on some of this stuff. And I think we're kind of learning that. We are learning that in public collectively. Like the AMM is a great example. I when it came out, it's a great tool for liquidity on chain. But we're seeing it has a lot of shortcomings. Like people are now really internalizing what impermanent loss means from a liquidity provider standpoint. Like, wow, wait, you're just constantly selling an option against volatility, basically. This is expensive. This actually kind of is inferior because it's hard for traders to win and LPs to win at the same time, right? Like, you're kind of seeing that with GMX2, with some of the models it's created where it has no slippage fills, right? And an AMM model, that AMM doesn't scale that well. And that no slippage thing is a problem because liquidity has a cost embedded in it. And there shouldn't be no slippage because then you're kind of hiding the true cost of what, say, $1 million fill would do. There should be slippage for that. That's information on what the market's providing you right now. And there have been some attacks on it because of that. And to defend against it, they've had to like increase their fees. And a couple other things, I think, to like mitigate some of that profitability so they can, survive. And this kind of circling back to the order book, like there's a reason why I think TradFi has fallen on the order book. It's a liquidity model where everybody can win. It's the liquidity that we provide. And Rabbit is not reliant on its traders losing to make money fundamentally. And like liquidity providers on GMX, like you are betting that they're not good at what they do and that they lose money. And it's a solid bet, frankly, but like it's also, there's kind of a conflict of interest there, right? Where like the exchange itself kind of wants you to lose. A casino wants you to lose too, right? And you will lose at a casino, statistically speaking, like the way it's set up. The OB is the order book. You know, we don't need anyone to lose. In fact, like everybody can win here, and I think that's why TradFi kind of fell on that as the best form of liquidity. And to kind of again go back to your question on that, like I do think we should be on chainifying what exists right now in TradFi. I don't think there's a lot of, I think the inherent flaws in a lot of this stuff is that they're centrally controlled and they're not transparent. Like the banking system being a great example of the lack of transparency in the financial system and what that causes. And the, you know, the state seizing assets, civil asset forfeiture, what happened to the Canadian truckers being very simple examples of how the state can arbitrarily just, no, you can't take your money out. Like we own this now. Like those are to me some of the biggest shortcomings of this system. The lack of clarity on the conflicts of interest, the opacity, and the control. And DeFi as its like core tenets undoes all of that. So I think much more we should focus on scaling what we're building now. You know, don't run before you can walk. You know, we're still trying to support a lot of stuff on here, and we're not there technologically. And once we are really there technologically, of course, we can reinvent the wheel if it actually makes sense, but don't just do it for the sake of doing it. You know, let's see if we can actually iterate and improve on stuff. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So that would be my mentality there.
Yeah, I like what you said about kind of like the innovations within DeFi specifically, like what bringing this stuff on chain kind of has done for a broader ecosystem. Before we hop into kind of some more details on Rabbit specifically, I wanted to touch on some of the things that I feel like not many people, including myself, are aware of that allow for the same ethos that crypto does. You mentioned Filecoin and Render becoming important during these like escalations, and Ali actually introduced me to Urbit. I never say it right, but
Urbit.
one of those two. And he introduced me to that, and I haven't fell fully into the deep end on it yet, but I've kind of seen the importance as time's gone on. So I want you to kind of pill the people that are just aping in the shit coins and playing with DeFi into these like more important, I guess, or as equally as important technologies. Hello? I think your mic's muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I was muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely more important. Yeah, the infrastructure layer, I think, is undeniably like, you know, that's I think personally that's where most of the value accrues long term. Though I'm very open to that thesis being wrong. Fat protocol or fat app thesis. I'm more fat protocol sympathizer, but we'll see how DYDX does with that, with their app chain, and ours too, honestly. But yeah, like people go into the shitty nonsense in crypto that pumps because, you know, most people have a high time preference and they want to make money now. It's a bit of a flush of, you know, serotonin and adrenaline, and, you know, it's more invigorating. I get it. Like it's socially just more fun. It's playful. It's silly. And that, you know, it just feeds into kind of thing you'd expect people to, that's the kind of thing you would expect to get much more eyes on it and to be visible because it's just more easily digestible. And this response to it is more readily apparent or is more readily there. And so people like it. But obviously that's not important. Like Pepe is not a real thing, right? Like, I mean, some of these tokens are just silly. And I'm not opposed to that, by the way. I'm just calling them what they are. They're silly, but I'm totally fine that they exist. And I don't think DeFi has a structural problem because they exist. I think a lot of people in this space like to harangue us or slander DeFi as all shitcoins, even guys who are deep in the space. It's just like, you're not paying attention to some of the other stuff being built here. Like stop, like clean up your feed. Like it's not just Pepe. If you only follow like the shitcoin coterie, like, yeah, you're going to be blackpilled that this is all crypto is, but like, you know, expand your base, like follow some Urbit people, follow me, follow like builders, like, you know, Bantag and guys that don't talk about this, like guys that talk about stuff actually being worked on or built or what have you. Your worldview will change based on your surroundings. And so to that end, like to touch on that, yeah, like the core infrastructure stuff is really important. I think we're going to need some kind of decentralized storage, a la like an AWS or Azure. some kind of decentralized communication or social networks. And then something that is curious to me is decentralized compute or GPUs. I don't know if we need that, but that will be really helpful. And eventually we probably will need that when the requirements of AI kind of make it unfeasible to maybe host this stuff on your own. But, you know, on the decentralized storage component, that's Filecoin, right? That's the thing that looped me into this space, frankly, that kind of was my red pill. There's other ones too. There's storage. There's a third one that's prominent. I can't. Arweave. Arweave's another one. Filecoin, Arweave, storage. Those are three I know of, but they're all kind of working towards the same means and end. I think they're awesome. I hope they all succeed. I don't think, you know, I think there's plenty of room to grow here, and this isn't like a competitive market yet. We're growing the pie for everyone. On the communication side, Urbit just, you know, is just very, I love Urbit. Like, I love its vibes and its kind of essence. When you get to know the guys and kind of the ethos of it all, it's just, it attracts a lot of just really based, cool, smart people. And it's still this very niche, nerdy thing. It's like Bitcoin in 2010, you know, like only kind of weirdos like it right now. But that's what makes it endearing to me. That's what makes like it a cool place to be. But what they're basically doing is changing what compute, how the internet basically operates. Because right now, you know, everything, you're a serf essentially, and you are a serf on the servers of Google and Amazon and Twitter, right? They own all your data. They own everything. You own literally none of it. And they're not synchronized. So like your data on Google is not seen by your data on Twitter, is not seen by, you know, et cetera. So like, you're kind of like this weird peasant who has like all of his belongings stored at these individual places. You own none of it, and it's not coordinated. Urbit is a personal server, essentially. It's kind of, it makes running a server accessible and easy for people who aren't very technically inclined. Where you store and hold all your own stuff. You store a persistent identity, which is called a planet, which you can then engage and interact on all the apps in the ecosystem. But its ethos there is that like the internet has a lot of technical debt. It was built the way it was because of technical shortcomings. Now we can support how it really should work, and it should work by everyone running their own server and engaging that way in an ecosystem. So Urbit is like the decentralized communication component of it for that reason. You can't get canceled. You can't have your stuff taken. You own your data. You own all that. On the Render is a good example in distributed compute. In fact, off the top of my head, it's the only one. Their distributed GPU usage. They're the only one I know of, by the way. There might be others. But you know, they seem to be mostly kind of advertised towards artists right now, but there's clearly big AI application there from the GPU standpoint. I would love to see more of that. I think that's an amazing idea. People will definitely pay for that, I think. So this is the kind of stuff that like I encourage you to keep an eye on more closely, because these are the things that will really take us to the Holy Land, so to speak. If we want to survive, we need stuff like this to work, be scalable, and be things people can use. And you know, that they're important. So I would encourage everyone to like support, like DeFi to me is not just finance, it's decentralized everything. It's decentralized infrastructure. You could say that's what Web3 says it is, but Web3 just has this VC stink on it to me that makes it unpalatable. But that's what DeFi really means to me. It's like a coalescence of all those things and what they're building. So you can also interact you can have your financial freedom interaction and all your other forms of interaction as well, is what DeFi worked towards. So.
Yeah, lots of different great verticals there, I think. I mean, we could spend an entire episode on each one of those. We did an episode on Urbit, which was a bit more fundamental, and it didn't really like, you know, like you said, I think the most endearing part of it right now is kind of the vibes and just being able to talk to the people who are actually there, who are interested, who are building. That's to me like the magic of it right now. The decentralized compute bit, I think the only one that I'm familiar of there is Akash. I don't know if you've heard of them before, but it's a Cosmos chain. They're taking more of a marketplace approach. I'm not too familiar with Render myself, but
Akash, how do you spell that? I'll look them up.
Akash.
AKASH. Awesome.
Yeah, cool project. I've been following them for quite a while. But yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot we could unpack there. I would like to get a bit more into RabbitX as well, though. I'm curious as to I'm curious as to the advantages of being on Starknet, or specifically being on a ZK rollup. Is that right now, does that lend specific advantages to an order book based DEX versus being on Arbitrum or Optimism or an OpStack rollup? And if so, or if not, does that improve over time as proofs become more efficient and quicker?
That's a good question. Like, yeah, that's a great one. And to be candid on your like, is it the best right now? Like, Optimism and Arbitrism Arbitrum and Optimism got there first. Like, they're great ecosystems. I think they're doing a fantastic job. But there are some limitations that they have in relation to their tech as compared to ZK ones. And the ZK ones have been harder to cultivate and perfect and scale. They're a little more computationally expensive too. But this is a long run decision, I guess, is my core point here. They're operable now. They're getting much, much better. But more importantly, though, I think they're the tech that really is what everyone gravitates to eventually. It's some of the issues with optimistic rollups, especially that technically fraudulent transactions could be posted, and you're relying on a good Samaritan, to point this out. I just feel like people will one day be made to care about that in a really unpleasant way. I hope they're not, but that's an issue there. The 7-day holds on withdrawals is another big one. Their TPS and their throughput is also theoretically much less compared to ZK rollups. I did some research on this in the past. I can't recall the numbers. But yeah, those are some pretty substantial, I think, shortcomings compared to ZK technology. With the ZK ones, it's apparently not technically feasible for a fraudulent transaction to get posted. Their throughput is apparently much higher when they're fully brought up to their full capabilities. And they just seem to be the long-term solution here. So that's why we chose them as our first layer one. And so was that your first part of your question? So why them now? You had a second part, I believe.
Yeah. Why them now? And I guess because the roadmap for optimistic rollups is currently mostly focused on, well, I guess in the long run, what most people are interested in is a greater degree of decentralization. Whereas, as far as I understand it, for ZK rollups, there's still a long way to go in terms of how scalable they are. So I'm wondering if that's if as users we would see more pronounced improvements in scalability and speed over time.
Yeah, and kind of a shortcoming that all the layer twos have, including ZK, ZK, Starknet, Arbitrum, etc. As far as I know, everyone's sequencer is centralized. I don't think anyone has a decentralized sequencer. And imagine if Ethereum had like one or two validators that decided what block orders were, and you just had to hope that they were honest. Like, that's kind of what we're doing here. Like, there's a multi-sig governing them, I believe, but you can look this up on L2Beat. I think this is where I found it, and I've heard this claim before. It's not my own. Every sequencer is centralized right now. I mean, that's obviously a problem, right? But that kind of speaks to technologically, we're nascent right now. We're developing away from that. Like, the path towards that is promising. In fact, one layer one, I think maybe it was CeeLo. They announced it recently that they're becoming a layer two on ETH. I think they just announced it, and they want to decentralize the sequencer. And I didn't see much commentary on that, but when I saw that, I was like, whoa, that's fantastic. Like, that's what this needs to be. Otherwise, it is kind of, yeah, it's not the true essence of DeFi. But again, this is a spectrum and a journey. Like, people who smear that right now, I'm just like, you're like someone who complains that the internet is slow in 1997. Like, yeah, the internet's slow, man. Like, you got to hear these stupid dial-up beeps and it disconnects sometime, and your mom's mad because she can't talk on the phone. But look what it became, right? Like, it's so myopic to me when people smear DeFi as centralized and point this out without seeing, like, what's the roadmap though? What are we driving towards here? And also, what's feasible right now? Like, if it was feasible to be decentralized and these teams were doing that, then I think you can make a different kind of claim, and I think you can maybe attack accordingly. But if you make that now, I just don't know what to say, dude. This stuff takes time. Like, we're very, very early stage. Like, DeFi really has only been around since 2020. It has not been, like, Bitcoin does not mark the creation of this. Bitcoin was like, again, like drawing from the generations of war and crypto, Bitcoin was the mercantilist basic bartering trade, right? And Ethereum and DeFi is the AWS startup business decentralization of it. Like it takes time to gestate to that from mercantilism. And, you saw the internet take the same path. So I think we'll develop towards that. We definitely are developing towards that. We want the order book to be fully on chain. We want that sequencing to be on chain, and more importantly, we want it to be verifiable and observable. Because then even if you do have someone who is like playing some games, at least you can see that they're playing games. That's the most important thing, is transparency, I think, there. And then we also want to have the sequencing of the orders be decentralized too. So Starknet does have a shortcoming there, but frankly, so do all of them, Arbitrum, Optimism, etc. So it's kind of like a pick your poison there. And so we're more curious, we're more concerned with what's the best long-term solution to scaling this ecosystem and to scaling us. And we landed on Starknet from that, and Starks within ZKs.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm very much in agreement with you on the general premise that like this stuff takes time, and a lot of the stuff that people complain about today is some of it's warranted, obviously, but a lot of it like will be fixed with time, I think. And when you go back and look at all the meme coin trading going on, it's when you like juxtapose that with how long this stuff takes, it kind of speaks to like, you have these people who want to get rich quick and who have a much shorter time frame, and then you have these systems being built that take time, which they don't have the patience to sit through. So it's you end up with some like pointless discussions, I think, on the timeline, which is part of the process, I guess. Getting a bit more into RabbitX here, I'm wondering if you can give us just like a quick pitch overview of what it is, maybe touching base on the recent announcement of RabbitX chain as well, just to kind of give the listeners a bit of a primer.
Yeah, definitely. So what RabbitX is, we're a perpetuals DEX on Starknet. The deposits right now happen on ETH mainnet though, and we use Starknet as a messaging broker for your withdrawals and deposits. So we do the bridging for you in a way using Starknet. We are working towards having, different forms of deposits on different chains, other layer ones, other layer twos, certainly Starknet. That is in our roadmap, in addition to like decentralized order book and things of that nature. We have order book liquidity, which we think is the God mode of liquidity. Like it's definitely the best model. And another analogy I use, like why we did the AMM, like no one would ever contend, even in like the 1990s or 80s, that, hey, if you describe Netflix to someone would say, well, that's definitely better than Blockbuster, right? Like obviously I'd want to just have it streamed here than drive and get a video cassette. But you couldn't stream videos in the 90s and 80s. Like the tech just wasn't there. So AMMs were a great solution to shortcomings now with scalability. But like as we get that throughput, the order book, I think, is going to become more and more prevalent. We use order book liquidity for that reason. We have no gas fees. We have up to 20 times leverage. And we have pretty objectively the lowest fees in the business, DeFi or CeFi, like definitely DeFi. You can fact check that. Any fact check I've seen has shown that on, we have no maker order fees and we have very low taker fees. And even on the CeFi side,
I checked it earlier today. Actually, it is true.
Oh yeah,
you guys do by far the lowest. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, keep us honest because I don't want that to be like a fluffy claim. Even on like the Binance side, like their taker orders, I think, are less, but they have maker. Their taker fees are a little less, I think, by a bit, but they have maker fees. We have no maker fees. So like on net, if you kind of look at those fees, like we're still better than them. So very cost effective. We're very fast. I quantified that in a post too, in terms of how quickly we recognize trades. And we have a really nice UI and like usability. Like we really want this to feel like a true thing that you would expect in TradFi, but it's DeFi, but the front end feels like TradFi smoothness and clarity and usability. It's not this clunky thing that we kind of like expect in DeFi. So like our ethos is no trade-offs. Like there doesn't need to be a trade-off here. If you're in DeFi, you don't need to like sacrifice your, the pleasant experience for that. So we really have that front of mind with everything. And yeah, and you can degen pretty hard with this if you want. You can buy and hold. You can do everything you want there. As far as like why we went with perps, we think they have a very strong product market fit, kind of just obviously so, right? Perps are definitely a solid DeFi primitive. They're here to stay. I think they're going to grow even more so. And DeFi has a lot of space to go there with taking the volume from CeFi, even including DYDX, including all of us. Like we're just like a fraction. Like I think it's 2 or 3% maybe. We have a tool that lets you see this, but CeFi still dominates the total volume. So everyone can win here for a long time. And I hope everyone does. And I think we're going to take a big chunk of that pie. We've been growing pretty rapidly. We surpassed 8 figures in volume every day for the last month, which is a first for us. We've been consistently 7 figures before then. So it's been a very nice organic move up. I love that there hasn't been like some, transient spike that dies down or something that seems to be like people doing stuff for an airdrop. It looks good. Like I feel very, very happy about the volume increase because it feels sticky. Anyway, that's what we are. That's what we offer. And our roadmap includes much more than just perps. We want to do derivatives and for a basket of other things, commodities, gold, Forex. We, even like indexes, say the S&P, the NASDAQ, we actually have discussed that internally. So you can even trade that in DeFi. So yeah, we have very, very high intentions that go much beyond just DeFi. Like it includes DeFi, but we want to like help bring the world on chain and offer assets that a bunch of people want to trade. So I hope that answers it.
Yeah, definitely. Quick clarifying question there. How do you guys offer gasless trading?
So the trading right now is in an order book, and that order book right now is off chain. That's the same model as DYDX. They have an order book. The order book is also off chain. Oh yeah, nice visual of it. So because of that, I mean, there are trade-offs there. The trade-off with that is your speed. You get to use an order book, and you get no gas trading. However, though, the order book is off chain, right? However, though, I just want to do a preemptive counterpoint there. If we were on the L2, again, the sequencers are all centralized. So like you still have that centralization vector, even if it's on chain. So just something to keep in mind. But we can offer things like gas-free trading with the order book being off chain. And the way we make money is from those fees that I mentioned, and they're very low, but there's no conflict of interest here between traders. We don't need traders to lose for us to make money. In fact, we want them to win. We want them to make money. Our liquidity model doesn't require traders losing over time. But that's how we offer the gas-free trading. So.
Gotcha. Okay. And then can we also get a little bit, I know it's, there's probably still a lot of details being fleshed out, but with RabbitX chain, what exactly changes between, I guess, what exactly changes when that's deployed? Will both RabbitX on L2 and the L3 continue to run in parallel? Will there be more focus on one or the other? Do you see one as being more, I guess, better than the other in the long run?
That's a great question. I'm going to qualify all these statements with this is still very much to be determined and could evolve. But the way I envision it is the L3 is definitely superior. And it's superior because of what I just described with the order book. The order book is off chain, right? So that's a vector of centralization. Bringing that order book on chain with an L3, the L3 can actually support the throughput and volume of an order book. So when we do that, then you have true DeFi in all its like layers, so to speak. So that's the real benefit. Like it's very cheap on chain trading. It's verifiable, observable, and consistent with the ethos of DeFi and what we want to see happen. So I would expect that would be the thing most people use as it develops and is launched. Its launch is a bit of a ways off, but our goal is to have that be the main resource. The off-chain version that might still exist. It's hard to comment on. Maybe at that time, hopefully by that time we have maybe some institutional clientele, and they want to do stuff in a dark pool of sorts. I don't know. Maybe that's what the off-chain order book kind of sticks around for. Hard to comment on that. I'm not sure, but me personally, I view the L3 as the ultimate goal, and where most of the liquidity and activity gravitates, because it's all the beautiful things that we love about DeFi. So that's the benefit with that, and why we want to build it.
How are you guys thinking about the process of decentralizing the order book? Because obviously the way it is now, you know, the benefits are they kind of speak for themselves, but I'm curious as to like holistically how you're thinking about the long run of going from where the app on the L2 is now versus getting to a point where it's very core to true DeFi. Like taking, I guess, DYDX for an example, with them starting out with an off-chain order book that was mostly just managed by the foundation, slowly opening up to market makers and permissioned actors, and then in the future when they move to DYDX chain, allowing that for anyone who is capable of spinning up a validator technically. Do you guys see that as like a gradual process, or is there a specific way you're thinking about getting that done?
So like on the market, that's a good question. Right now we do have several market makers running on liquidity currently. It's not something that we're like managing from a foundation or something. Like we have real market makers who are incentivized financially to do a good job. They make money by maintaining a spread, keeping orderly markets, and importing information into their book. That same kind of logic and framework would need to be present on an L3 to have like an order book continue to manifest in the way that we see it now. I'm just speaking this from a strategic lens, not a technical one, because there might be like technical oddities here, I guess, that I'm not familiar with. But it should still manifest in that same way. Like I kind of like how Uniswap V3 lets you like set and move your liquidity dynamically. Like this is an order, like that's basically what a market maker does, but he does it very often and for a lot of different things and constantly. And Uni V3, I think, kind of is slower than that, more expensive to do that as quickly as maybe you'd like. It's like one range and you stay there. So basically it would be allowing that kind of customizable market maker style order book updates all the time. You can see their book, you can see their liquidity. You should be able to see all of it. And then you place trades accordingly, and it gets filled in a way that everyone can see. And the sequencing of that too is decentralized. So there's not someone meving your order, and putting theirs in front of yours, or, someone doing something that benefits them and not you. That's how I see it manifesting. That's how it kind of currently manifests off chain. And I don't see a reason why that should change when you bring that on chain. Just the on chain infrastructure needs to be able to support the very often and quick updates and movements that go into a market maker market making, which, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And right now it's expensive and kind of unfeasible for that. We want that to change with our layer 3.
Right. Yeah. I think I'm in favor of more hybrid infrastructures, but I do like all the different approaches and ideas I'm seeing thrown around about how to properly and in a well-intentioned way implement more efficient order books. I guess like an interesting example that I have recently been looking into is I guess it's not perps, it's options, but Premia has, they have their base AMM model with a couple different features for V3, but they also have an on-chain order book on Arbitrum Nova, whereas the AMM lives on Arbitrum 1, and all of that liquidity is being aggregated to the same interface for traders. So they end up with like 4 different liquidity sources, including automated vaults. So there's a lot of really cool approaches out there, and it's good to hear that you guys are thinking about it in a thoughtful way. I think, especially with RBX chain.
Yeah,
I would like to talk a little bit about the token, if you're able to, at least in terms of what the long-term vision for how that'll be used looks like. As far as I understand it right now, it's just an incentives token, but obviously with the introduction of RBX chain, having to have that be governed and in the process of decentralizing the order book, and once you're eventually there, your governance becomes a lot more important, obviously. How are you guys thinking about how the RBX token is going to play into everything in the long run. And is there any features or I guess like alpha you can give as to what that's going to look like in the near future?
So, I mean, we definitely want this to be a utility token. It will be a utility token that has like a true, application to the ecosystem, and governance is going to be one of those things, which I don't think is anything to scoff at, honestly. Like governance tokens in general, I think are maligned as, as useless or valueless. And if you think that, I would encourage you to look at a lot of the stocks trading on NASDAQ that don't pay any dividend, that don't have any actual claim on assets. And like, what do you own there? Like, you own a governance token. You don't have any real equity ownership in anything. Like, if that company goes bankrupt, it doesn't have any hard assets. Like, you get zero. So like, you own a governance token. Like, just be comfortable with that. Like, it has no cash flows or any kind of the value that you're smearing governance tokens for not having. Like, fine, but just be consistent with that, because a lot of the highest paying, like highest valued things that have done the best pay no dividend or pay a very small one. Like Nvidia's dividend's a joke. Like, they should just stop paying it. It's a fraction of what it's worth. Like, just give the money to Jensen and let him reinvest it in the company. So I just little rant on that. The governance tokens are not inherently valueless. Like, I think empirically that's not even an opinion. That's just obviously true. And, just go to the NASDAQ if you disagree with that. So we'll have that. But it also will have some like raw utility with the actual platform. We do want this to be a way of returning, in some respect, fees to users that we generate. So you could say real yield in that way. And we're not just going to be printing off more RBX to pay you out in RBX. Like, it's not an inflation thing. We want it to be something sustainable that gives you something that's valuable, that's actually generated from the platform and the value it's giving to users. We also plan on having staking involved in some respect. That can manifest in a handful of different ways, though. Staking in respect to maybe having reduced fees if you have own a certain amount of RBX and you stake it, and you trade on the platform. Maybe there's some kind of synergistic benefit there for you. Fees is an easy one, but there might be others even beyond that. So as a trader, it could help motivate you there if you're actually a user of the platform. And then also staking insofar as providing liquidity. We do want to provide, and you mentioned hybrid liquidity forms, and I agree with you. Like, I think an AMM style thing is a nice augment of an order book sometimes, especially if like you're in a vault that's kind of trading with the exchange in a way that's trying to do a proprietary model to collect a spread. That's basically market making. Like, you're providing liquidity to our exchange when you trade with our exchange, and you give our market maker something to interact with. We want RBX to be incorporated into that in some way with staking. So when you are staking it, you are providing liquidity to the platform in some kind of real way. Maybe that's through an AMM model, or maybe it's through some other way. But we do want fees to have fees returned to the users through ownership of RBX. So real yield, that's where that term comes from. It'll have governance properties like many other tokens do. And then also staking ones in terms of providing liquidity. I can't give any alpha details on quite what that'll look like yet, but we are discussing a lot of different avenues there on it. So we want it to be have value and utility in a couple different ways.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with a token and a liquid, efficient order book exchange that I think returns good value to the users. I'm interested, I guess, just like from a pragmatic standpoint. I was looking into RabbitX like entirely earlier today, and I found that being a larger market maker on RabbitX, it sounds like it's insanely profitable. Like, if you're just providing maker side liquidity, it sounds like getting paid instead of, at a certain fee tier, I believe fees drop into the negative. So it sounds like you get paid for placing maker orders with upwards of 50 mil monthly volume or something like that. And then you guys also have the incentive program, which I'm not too familiar with, but I'm hoping you can shed some light on what that program consists of, kind of like who it's targeted towards, and if there's any info you can share on like what kind of actors are partaking in it.
Yeah, great research, and you're right. Like, if you are doing, at over 50 million in volume, your maker fees are negative, by 0.01%, 1 basis point. And at over 1.5 billion in volume, you get 2 basis points back to you. So yeah, just something to keep in mind. You can make a lot of money doing that, and we have had we've I mean, our volume isn't quite to the point where we've seen people actually make money from that, but you definitely can, and it can be quite profitable to you. And we understand that, like, you can't be greedy here. Like, if you want to attract this liquidity and this value, we should provide it, and we should let people partake in our success too. And that's kind of the underlying mentality there. We want to share in those riches as we achieve certain volume figures, and that's why you have the negative maker fees after certain tiers. And this is all available in the docs too, if anyone would like to check. On the liquidity incentive program, to attract more liquidity, it offers incentives to providers to provide deep two-sided markets. We provide, and I'm reading off some of our docs here internally, 7.5% of the initial token supply of RabbitX tokens to be distributed to liquidity providers over 2 years based on metrics measuring their spread, depth, and uptime. And then on the docs page, it kind of goes into what that eligibility looks like, and how you can go about achieving that. And we've paid out a strong amount of liquidity of rewards here so far, I believe. If you scroll down, I think we show it. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I believe the number is in there. Oh yeah, you'll see. So RBX rewards per month, March, April, May, etc. That's the payouts we're targeting and what we're giving to people who are market making for us through this program. I think the best thing to advise, if you're curious to learn more, if you go to our docs in liquidity incentive rewards, go to there, and it gives a really strong overview of what we're looking for, why we do it, and then you can apply. You can apply to be one. We'll review it. We'll reach out to you, and yeah, you can make some real money providing liquidity with us. I think that's a big part of, like, when you say democratizing access to finance, which is sort of a platitude, it feels like one when people say it, but this to me is like a real, like, concrete instantiation of that is what we want this to be.
This is awesome. I really appreciate the insight on RabbitX. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to discuss? I have a follow-up question to this that's less about RabbitX, more about you. But anything announcement-wise or feature-wise that you'd like to highlight with RabbitX?
Yeah, a couple of things quickly, I suppose. So I mentioned the volume increasing really steadily, and really positive about that. We're releasing special order types, which have been in the makings for a bit, but we test these things a lot, and we really, really want to make sure they're good to go when we release them to production. But within, I hope, a week or so, a weekish, we should be releasing some special order types like stop loss, take profit, things like fill or kill, all or none orders, order types that are seen commonly on brokers. We want traders to have access to all those. So those will be coming very soon. And we're listing new markets all the time. Of course, we have the majors like Bitcoin, ETH, Sol. But we were the first, and I believe this is, I'm pretty sure this is true. And I know that I was very active when ARB first came out and the perpetuals. We were the first to list ARB perps. If someone else listed us before us, they might have beat us by like an hour or something. It was definitely no earlier than the same day. So we list some markets pretty quickly if there's demand, and we can make a market for it with our MMs. We were one of the first to list Pepe. We might list WorldCoin and Rollbit if there's enough demand. Some people have been asking for it. So we list new markets as there's demand for it. So if you're interested in trading something, hop into our Discord and ask. And if the people want it, hey, we'll give it to them. So just a little added comment, I guess, there on us.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is like I'll be honest, I haven't used it yet, but I think I'm not really a big trader, but this looks great to me. I mean, you guys did a great job. Last question, that's a little bit of an open-ended one. It seems like you're thinking about a million different things throughout your day, and like very large, complex topics, whether it be crypto or broader ecosystems. I kind of wanted to hear maybe a bit about something that's been on your mind more recently that you haven't got a chance to write about, or something that's just constantly bugging you before you head to bed at night, like staring down at the ceiling. Um, yeah, what kind of stuff do you just think about?
Yeah, I know. That's your observation is a good one. I think that's a bit of like my ADHD probably coming out too. It has its pros and cons, right? So that's an interesting one. Something that concerns me, if that worries me, or that I think that is always good to defend against, and I think it's what DeFi actually. Probably this is why maybe subconsciously I'm so attracted to DeFi. Honestly, is this what I'm about to say? And I did a thread on this recently too, on the last podcast I did, where I didn't explain something I thought very well on why I was EACC, which is AI jargon for effective accelerationism, which is basically saying we're not, build this thing. We're not being afraid of cyborgs or Skynet, and certainly don't put it in the hands of governments to expect you to protect from this. If there's one thing that kind of concerns me, and this is sort of a concept I wrote on in the thread, it's what I would almost call complex adaptive system deniers, and that's a bit of a branding language, I think, there with calling deniers, because that it's funny, like they often will use the denier tag for when you don't accept their claims of things. Call you a denier as if it's like a truth and they know it because their model says it. But I go into this thread of breaking down what can and can't be modeled. And I have, for those who are familiar with like Nassim Taleb, you could say I have a very Talebian kind of view towards these systems. And when you try to control them, you just sort of you try to stop volatility, and you end up embedding fragility, and they end up coming up and manifesting volatility in the way you couldn't expect. Is the people that try to control or stop us, or control and stops complex adaptive systems by imposing their will on it, like what people are trying to do with AI and decelerationist kind of approaches, which is trying to model this sci-fi tier scenario of one guess upon one guess upon one guess, and we'll say each one of these guesses has like a 5 to 10% chance of being accurate, right? It's like very far out scenarios, and if you compound that, take it to the 8th power, it's a number so small it won't fit on your calculator. So like these models and these predictions are they're never right. Like the modeling of the economy, like even the people who are technically officially control it, like they're surprised where rates go. They can't see what inflation will be next quarter, right? The state and all the Fed saying inflation will be this, that, whatever. Completely wrong. Like your models, they don't work. They're not good. And it's because the economy is a complex adaptive system, and it has God knows how many inputs and variables, and they're manifesting in a way you don't know or have any insight into, with second, third, and fourth order effects that you can't foresee. And that's just a human shortcoming. I'm not, it's not that they're dumb. It's that it's a bit of an arrogance thinking you can like predict and model these things. And I think people in the financial system are going to try and assert their will on us in that way, because again, we are kind of undermining any ability they have to control that complex adaptive system, which I think a financial ecosystem and financial world is definitely that. With AI, which will definitely evolve along the lines of I think it'll evolve similar to like a biological organism in a way. I sort of poetically view crypto and AI as like a form of digital homeostasis that will continue to develop at a similar pace to each other to sort of offset what the other does. AI this is a thing I wrote on where I call AI artificial abundance and crypto artificial scarcity. Because you can create, I could write close to a novel right now with a prompt to an LLM, like huge abundance. Wow, my product, but one, I have comments on the quality of that and what have you that are in the human value on that I won't get into. But AIs can create a lot of things very quickly and easy that'll make it difficult to navigate the world. And crypto, by its very nature, in like crypto, the financial world, and even cryptography, it secures things and makes it artificially scarce. Like the things we have are artificially scarce, right? There's no reason for Bitcoin to have only 21 million of them. or ETH to have the inflation schedule. Like we could code this up to make a trillion of them, you know? So, but it's instantiated through cryptography, which lets us put that scarcity into it, which lets us navigate the world better, create value. I think cryptography will offset AI in that way with signing information and what have you. But anyway, to circle back to your question, like I think AI will develop in a way that's very akin to a complex adaptive system. I think it is far, far more dangerous to have that transcendent technology, the most important probably of our time, to be given in the hands of a government. Like if you are fundamentally afraid of AI and your answer is put clamps on it, control from regulations, you are fundamentally saying, I think this technology is safer in the hands of bureaucrats and lawyers than it is in the hands of technologists, developers, and engineers. Like, I think that is just the most completely backwards, corrupt, just neurotic and afraid. And I understand where the fear comes from when it's genuine. I do think some people are genuine, afraid, concerned. That's valid. I'm not smearing them. But that is your alternative. Like, again, all of life is a trade-off. Like, which trade-off do you think is more risky here? The possibility of your stormtrooper AI situation manifesting, or the possibility that a government, which inherently politicizes anything it does, which has huge histories of abuse, scandal, homicide, war. Like there's, I don't need to go into like the negatives that we've seen from governments, not mentioning politicizing it and making it much worse. You think that's a smaller risk than the stormtrooper? I think the latter situation of government control and what they'll do to it and politicizing it is far more one likely risk. Almost, I'd say likely insofar as like more than 50%. And if you're afraid of it becoming deadly, I also think, hey, like something like that's all powerful, that's much more deadly in a government's hands. Like, it's almost, I don't want to analogize it's like a nuclear weapon so much, but it's something that no government should have complete control over, because I do think it becomes dangerous in that way. So models should be public. They should be open source. The development of it should be, transparent. And I think that is by far the best way to mitigate any risks, is to let, intelligent people observe and build this thing openly, than to have it be closed source internally, run by guys who have obvious regulatory capture motivations, like, Sam Altman and OpenAI. So that's just a concern that always gets at me. And that's, mitigating and stopping complex adaptive system deniers is the too long didn't read of that rant. And making robust decentralized systems that stop them from trying to control you, because their conclusion always manifests in that they should control things. They know better than you, and they're going to implement this in the right way. And just as kind of an ideology, as a element of me personally, that just upsets me. So anyway, sorry, bit of a rant there.
Oh, that's great. I actually really liked that thread. I read that one the other day. It was a great one. Yeah, I think that about does it for episode 31. I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate people who tuned in. Thanks a lot for doing this, man.
No, my pleasure. Always love doing them. I'm honored to be invited on. So great speaking with you guys.
Thanks, Dimitri. Appreciate it, man. It was a lot of fun.
Hey, you guys. Take care, man. See you on the timeline.
Yep.
Yeah.